Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm here with my co-host, Clint McPherson, as always.
What's up, everybody? I'm excited to be here for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, Nick Cavuoto.
I really appreciate it, guys, and thanks for having me on the show.
Definitely. Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, it's an honor to have you and on the show today. And before we launch and everything, I think it's important to introduce yourself and tell our listeners what you do.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, my background is pretty diverse. I like to keep it, relatively, to the point on this stuff. But I think that, big picture, I love helping navigate entrepreneurs and executives through this kind of constantly evolving digital space. But in that process of understanding that and working with Fortune 500 companies and working with, executives running billion-dollar organizations, and all of the, things that we can count as successful and like achieving what needs to be achieved, I just found like there was this deep brokenness when it came to people in context of relationships. And, I often say this, but entrepreneurs are really a lot of the times trying to help the previous version of who they used to be. And so it's cool when I worked in these, massive boardrooms with all these incredibly powerful people. At the same time, they're investing a lot into me. And I'm also giving them, opportunity to see the blind spots that are happening even in their personal life. And that's where I had permission to have those conversations is not normal as a kid, at that time in his early 20s. And then to be where we're at today, that's the big shift that happened. So I went from consulting with high profile corporations and, startups and small businesses to really transforming that into this big idea that relationships are rocket ships. And in the context of entrepreneurship, it is not at all anymore about competition. It's about collaboration. And so now I'm coaching and mentoring 6, 7, and 8-figure entrepreneurs in the context of digital marketing, but personally in the context of relationships.
Man,
that's very cool.
That's awesome, man. I know, I think it was Demetria reached out and sent me this video of you, brother. And like, I think it was Mentor Mind. It's on your Facebook page, Mentor Mind 001. And that's the title of the video, right? It's relationships, rocket ships. And I was like, I like that. It's unique and it stands out. And then when I started watching it, just your intro, brother, got me hyped. I was it was like 2:00 in the morning. It was 2:00 in the morning. I was about to fall asleep and it was like, dun, 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 dun. I was like, I was in the room. I'm just like, go, let's do it. And then, bro, I had to watch all 30 minutes of it, right? I was like, I think I hit Andrew up that night and I was like, hey, man, you have to watch this video. But do not do it if you're trying to go to bed. I was like, because you're going to do it for 2 hours.
And I got another one for you too.
I was so tired that night. I took it to heart. I didn't watch it, but I watched it the next day. And it was awesome.
Yeah, Mentor Mind itself was, it was birthed out of an idea. Like the first job I ever had was actually in vocational ministry. So that's going to freak some people out real quick. You're like, oh, okay, this dude was a pastor. Hold on a second. Well, yeah, but I've lived like 7 lives in one. So that was just one story. But, when I was 22, I was running an 8-figure budget. I was with the most powerful pastors in the world. In the context of being in a room of 40,000 people, do you know what it takes to control the temperature and stage presence in front of 40,000 people? Or if you're online and being able to have that contextual conversation in front of 80,000 people at one time and hold attention. Yeah. I mean, dude, it was insane, man. And but the thing, and when you watch the video, the Mentor Mind video, you can see like all of these different tensions in the story. And it's like a day in the life of vlog meets, a movie. It's really, really cool. But I just hugely celebrate my brother, Mike Zal, in Rochester. He's up in New York. And he does all my production stuff when it comes to vlogs and day in the life of style content. But it is really powerful. And I had a saying that I said a long time ago in a different context, which is we're responsible to tell the greatest stories ever told. And now I'm just finding the new rhythm for that. And for me, it's about putting other people in the spotlight. And at the same time, you've got to practice what you preach. And you've got to also at the same time be able to produce that high level content to be able to help other people do the same thing. So dude, that was just heart, man. That was like in December, I had a wrestling of like, what do I want to really do? And I really felt like it was to lead entrepreneurs and just step alongside of them, because there were so many things in life, you know, in the context that I was in my early 20s, it's like, you're talking to people twice your age about divorce. Like I didn't have any business being in that room because I was in like fractured, like girlfriend relationships, all that stuff. Right. But the exposure and also the understanding to trust my intuition to bring something up for them that they never even said, but that I could read into based on what they were saying, was a really cool context that helped Mentor Mind come alive in this context of helping entrepreneurs, not only with business, but I understand that business is a direct mirror to your life. And that's a super powerful realization.
Right now, I think I just, every day since I've watched that video, it's that beat and everything's been in my head, and it like has struck a chord with me. I'm like, man, this guy's dope. Right. So over the past several years, brother, changing gears a little bit. I know you've built and founded businesses that have combined and generated multiple seven figures. And in 2020, like you briefly said, now you decided to spend more time working with amazing entrepreneurs, right? That you know, that you actually knew that you could help scale to the next level. And so during this whole process that you've been going through and this whole shift, how have you seen the relationships you've developed fuel the direction of your business?
It's a brilliant question. How real can I be with you? Can I just go there? Is that all right?
Do it, brother.
All right. I was at for permission, so you guys can just accept it. So here's what's crazy. All right. You know, building businesses that were generating multiple seven figures, it's kind of easy to get comfortable, but like, I'm one of those people who at the same time, like I don't get too comfortable. You know, here's the interesting thing about scarcity. Scarcity can be if you don't have it. It can also be if you do have it. All right, come on now. That's just like a truth bomb right there, right?
Exactly.
So like, I have to go like for 2 seconds with my kids. All right. So I got 3 kids. So if you want to protect your kids too much, sometimes you end up strangling them and suffocating them, right? Because you're like, I want to protect you so much that they become asphyxiated, and in the theoretical sense, of course.
Exactly.
And then the opposite side, you know, you have like, if you're not protecting them enough, right, then someone else steals influence and that top position of that influence in that person's life or in that kid's life. And then now you don't have any type of response system in order to be able to gain traction when you want to point them in the right direction. So the big idea is like having a very successful business or businesses and holding on to it too tight is in the same exact parameter. If you're sitting there right now and you got $4,000 in your bank account and you have zero job, zero income, and you're like, this is going to run out in the next month. It's the same scarcity. So here's the important thing to understand. Every entrepreneur that you see out there who's successful, talking about 6, 7, 8 figures, all of them have no idea what they're doing. So let me just, for you really quick.
Common thread.
Yeah.
It is the common thread. And gurus are dead. They just don't know it yet. And what I mean by that is like people who show up and they're like, oh yeah, here's what I built. And I mean, it was so easy. And just to follow my framework and do what I tell you to do and buy my course, then you'll be successful too. That's just garbage. All right. People have seen through that stuff. You know, the Ty Lopez mosquito whole thing, like he's gone, right? Like it's not happening anymore. Lambo. So like, yeah, right. Check out my garage. So I think a lot of people are starting to see through that. And what are they going to go to? You know, the natural idea is to go to the opposite of the thing that hurt you or the thing that was false or the thing that didn't serve you. And so 6, 7, 8 figure entrepreneurs are just trying to figure, just like you're trying to figure it out. And here's the difference. The story that you tell yourself. So let me give you a framework really fast. Your story, so foundationally your story, determines your belief system, okay? Your belief system determines your values, and your values determine your actions. So a lot of people measure the action, and they try to change the action. How many times have you heard that before? Like, all right, well, you tell your spouse or significant other or an employee or a partner, like, dude, if you just stop doing that, then we could do this. Well, here's the deal. You're trying to change them at basically the tip of the iceberg, and you're not getting beneath the surface of the thing that will actually create positive motion and change. So for me, this has set the tee up for this whole thing. Built really successful businesses. I stopped selling stuff for a year because I felt like I was out of alignment. Okay. So I just sat. I lost my best friend in 25 years to the business. I went $200,000 into debt in 3 months. When you're running a business with 12 other employees and you also have all these other things happening, and you fall out of alignment and you stop selling, when, dude, I sold 15 people in a week. I mean, I didn't need other salespeople. That was easy for me to do. But when I fell out of alignment, I ended up basically creating a beast that I had to feed. It wasn't a mission that I felt like I was called to fulfill. It felt like a freaking burden. And so what once was a blessing turned into a massive burden. And when that happened, dude, it's like all hell broke loose. And so I kind of let the business free fall. And for 3 months, just trying to say, I don't know, I'll figure it out. 200K into debt. I'm still paying that off to this day. Restructure, launch Mentor Mind, 35 clients in 35 days. It was just like back, like old habits, like of just, it's so easy to sell once you know you have the best thing.
Right.
So I skyrocket the thing, dude. We're doing like, we went from zero essentially because I fired all my clients. So I was just like, I'd rather have zero than have what I have. So I just fired everyone and said, screw it, I'll figure it out. In December, do this right into January, 35 clients. We go back up to like 50K a month. Everything's all good. And then COVID, right hook, right to the face, because it has a live event component. And I didn't want to jeopardize the integrity of that. So I went from making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to like literally sitting across the table from one of my buddies and I couldn't afford a meal. Right. Dead ass.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's what we're finding out. I think a lot of businesses out there are, they're going along. They're like a cruise ship, just, they're carrying a lot, they're carrying a lot of people. They're going slow, they're going steady, they can go far. But if anything changes, if there's any issues, it's like, man, businesses might have 1, 2, 3 months max. We're finding out that a lot of businesses are just, they're doing well enough to survive to just totally, completely done in a month, in a couple weeks, maybe. Which is crazy.
Well, when you look at most Americans living paycheck to paycheck, that also applies to the private sector and people who have just normal jobs. The American culture is built on this whole idea of like this, just far enough to make it, to pay your bills, to just go back to do the, Groundhog Day and then do it again. And it just becomes this repetitive cycle, and it's generational because all those patterns are stories, right? So it's like, it always finds its way back up. So the idea within that culturally is like that we've got to change the name of the game in that. But certainly like when I look at what happened is the story shift of, I went from having multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to basically zero, back down to 4K a month. And like basically I lost 500 grand in 2 days. Okay. $500,000 in 2 days, done. Now, if I would have told myself the story of everyone else is losing their job, oh God, I guess I'm screwed. I don't know what to do. Right? If I went into that loop, it would have determined the action. So what I did was I just said, wow, this is awesome. Like what an opportunity, right? Like what am I going to do different? Exactly. I just pulled it in and I said like, all right, I'm not going to push this away. Does it suck? Yep. Do I have a 12K a month clip rate for my family? Yep. How am I going to figure that out? Easy. It's just entrepreneurs always figure out how.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Adversity is real though, and that adversity pushes us to take action, especially if you're a true entrepreneur. I mean, there's a lot of individuals that, right. You notice the alignment was out of whack. You notice that, a lot of things were pulling you down, but instead of letting it ride forever, you cut the cord. You are where you are now. You realized it, but you took action, right? And at the end of the day, taking that action is some of the most important things, because even if you failed at this point in time, you still took an action to get you a step closer where you're going to ultimately be in the first place. Right? So, I mean, brother, I feel everything you're saying, my man.
Dude, it's huge. It's huge, especially for digital agencies. I mean, they with a lot of local business stuff, and but it came to go to your question, Clint. It came down to this one conversation that I had with this dude who lives in my neighborhood. Okay, the people who you least expect can help you in the places that you assume are the least, expected places of where you're going to find breakthrough is exactly where it is.
And that's like where the genius of sales. I was going to say sales. If you know how to sell, you'll always be okay. But it's not just, people have this, vision of, going door to door selling stuff, or like this bad stigma about sales, but it's not. I think it's interesting as being an entrepreneur. It's sales. A lot of sales is being creative and figuring out ways mechanisms that can just drive sales to your business. And it's just thinking outside the box and embracing the opportunity. So sorry, I just cut you off, but
No, dude. I think it's brilliant. Here's the number one sales tactic that you can use for any business or technique. If you have a marketing bone in you, which I'm sure most salespeople do, usually it's like, we're siblings, sales and marketing. Content builds relationships. Relationships build trust, and trust drives revenue. So in the context of sales, if you can start creating really amazing content, whether that's through a DM, through a post, through a story, through a whatever, through videos, it can start drawing in all the things that are required in order to generate what we really want, which is more money. But that comes in the context of, in 2020, human relationships, spit shakes, right? It's like the 50s again. You're going to work with people that you trust and people that you like, which the way you get access to them knowing you and liking you is through content that you develop. So like that's, I think people massively underestimate the ROI of like a 30-minute Zoom call for free.
Oh yeah.
Massively misunderstand it. And if you're on social,
Absolutely.
like MLM style, like just trying to sling, your latest belly band, it's it's repulsive, right? It's actually polarizing. So people back away from that, but you guys know how to do it, right? And it's that tension between providing value, being present. But here's the hack on that as well. There's one layer that's deeper: matching worldview. This is huge. If you want to connect with people on a higher level, you need to, number one, be vulnerable and go first. And number two, you need to find philosophies and beliefs that match that of the other person. And if you do those two things correctly, the whole game's busted and you won 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. In the context of relationships, if you're like, dating or whatever, one of the best ways that you can develop a high level of trust with the person sitting across the table from you is to be vulnerable.
Yeah,
For sure.
That is the reason why I tell my story of failure. It's not that fun. My wife gets really uncomfortable when all I talk about is how I've lost a ton of money. But the influence, and I've also made a lot of money, so that's great. And just even within the last last 2 weeks, I mean, unbelievable opportunity that would have never come my way. But even just on the opposite side of that, of like looking at that tension of like vulnerability, scars are cool. Gushing wounds are disgusting, right?
Yeah, definitely. No doubt.
Show the scar. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm telling you guys around something that really sucked that I went through, and something that was a really horrible experience, but there's always breakthrough on the opposite side. So even though I was at 4K 3 weeks ago, I'm at way over 40 now. With an investment in a company, the minute that it's doubled, I get half the company and they're scaling to 100 million.
Yeah.
That cannot happen in the context of perfect circumstances, perfect content, and whatever. This is why I say that relationships are rocket ships. This dude lives 10 doors down from me, okay? 10 doors down from me. I passed his house literally 500 times, and I've never seen the guy, had no idea who he was. My buddy Tony, who runs shipoffers.com, Tony had a conversation with me. I started a mastermind in my community during COVID and said, hey, what business owners want to get together? Tony shows up. He runs a $20+ million dropshipping company. Great mentor, by the way, right? So it's like, can't make this stuff up, right? So have a conversation with him, and he says, I want you to give 10 free calls to people at whatever your value rate is. It's probably $1,000, $2,000 It's for someone to talk to you about generating money, building a product, whatever. It's like, so I want you to give them all away for free, 10 of them. And I was like, okay, dude, I'll do anything to get unstuck right now, because I was feeling that stuck feeling. Relationships are rocket ships. How'd you get out of it? So I said, all right, dude, I'm in. I'll do it. I'm going to do it, whatever. I posted it the next day. 21 people booked because I forgot to put a limiter on it because I thought no one would book. Right? And that's what happens, right? We doubt ourselves in times, right? We think, what do I have to really offer? What do I have to really say? Because I'm hurting. Give the gift that you want someone else to give you. And watch the boomerang hit you in the face 10 times harder on its way back. And that's what happened, dude. So that, just producing content, a friend of a friend, like some distant connection. My wife, we moved to Colorado. The first person she met, her best friend from college, her brother is the guy who lives 10 doors down. She saw all my content on Facebook and said, you should follow this guy. She said to her brother, and he invited me over for cigars. And 2 days previous, I lost a $250,000 deal. He invited me over for cigars. I went over, and this is the op of now, where this is going to be a company that sells for $50+ million that I'll get half of.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah. You never know who just lives next door or who, and what's interesting about specifically this whole, COVID-19 thing is that it's separating everybody in one way, but it's also like, I've never felt more connected to a lot of people in my life. A lot of I'm talking to high school friends I haven't talked to I saw a high school friend I haven't talked to since high school, and then with business, things are connecting, I think, in a just a different way. And people are like, all right, let's really dig into this online thing. Like, it's always been there, but now we actually have to use it so we can actually maybe be more efficient, instead of worrying about, going and physically being places, which is great. That's awesome. And we should, continue to do that when we can. But yeah, it's, there's definitely been an opportunity presented at this time to really connect and learn about people and resources that we never imagined.
For sure.
So it's pretty cool. Well, Nick, I wanted to ask you about, you sort of touched on it, but specifically with how do you use content to build relationships? And there's a lot to that, I know. So.
Well, I think first of all, you have to, your worldview, your perspective has to be that generosity begets generosity. That's number one. Like, for me as a person, I'm a giver, which means it's very hard for me to receive. Right. So I love to give to others, but when people do special things for me, like if someone threw me a surprise birthday party or said of all the amazing things that I did from a stage, it's literally the most humiliating, like very difficult thing for me. And I've done a lot of release work around that and like inner work of like how and why and understanding that there's a certain amount of like over performance when it comes to like my work. So the things I put my hands to, simply because there's acceptance that I'm searching for. And I know that comes from my dad. So like 100%, I understand how this whole thing functions and I see it and there's high awareness. And so when I look at creating content in order to build relationships, in order to grow my business, I just look for like common stories that every single person can relate to. That's the type of person who I want to help. And guess who it is that I want to help? The previous version of me. And so I've already hacked the game. It's like, remember Game Shark, guys? Like for Super Nintendo.
You hook it up.
I have that. I have the Game Shark and I have all the cheat codes to it. And guess what it comes down to? Being an amazing human and just showing up. Like the amount of just like people who I coach, where I give them this whole entire framework. And by the way, I give them this whole entire framework. And the whole reason why is just to get them out of their own way. Yeah. Some people believe that like being intellectual or having a process or a system or a formula is the pathway to getting what they need to then just go actually operate in what they need to operate in, which is their intuition. So the distance between us being willing to accomplish something or willful and actually just going and doing it, the gap for most people is an intellectual process. So I give them this whole sell them what they want, give them what they need. So here's your process. You're going to create 60 pieces of content over 12 weeks. I'm going to coach you how to do it. The outcome is going to be that you're going to be the number one influencer in your audience within that 12-week period. Just watch it happen. And it always does. And through that process, all I'm doing is getting them out of their own way. Yeah. People overcomplicate the content process more than you would ever imagine. There is not a formula that is really a formula. The first thing that I have someone do, content creation, is to tell a personal story that's vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean,
I lead by example.
That right there, when you place them in that position, though, it forces them to keep it real, right? Same way with your story. Same way with if you're facing the imposter syndrome or whatever it is. Once you realize that, but you keep everything real and you look at it and it's like, I need to get out of my own way, right? Again, it's my mind playing tricks on me. I'm not good enough or whatever. But that's the hardest part for some of these individuals, to get past that or to see through it, because they're like, I don't know what is my story. I don't know. You tell me. You know it better than me. I didn't live it, but you know it, right? But they're always looking at you to tell their story. And you're like, bro, I watched your video. It's genius. You put the sticky notes on the window, and they're sitting there just throwing stuff on it, and you're basically telling them, look, this is the moment to put everything down. Just let it fall out, right? Just jot it down. If it comes to your mind, throw it on a piece of paper. And then, I mean, it's just powerful the way you've approached it. And I think, again, when it's, like you said, one of the biggest obstacles is them getting in their own way, I believe, right? Because that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Dude, 100%. And 100%. And, you know, that's why the personal story is so valuable, is because I teach them a framework, and I go through so I start with okay, so here's how you would build a funnel using this, right? So I'm giving them all okay, here's the structure, here's the method, here's the methodology, here's the process. Then I go, okay, I want you to create 3 things that are personal, 3 things that are professional as topics, overarching topics that you care about. So if relationships are one of them, that's probably more personal and professional, but marketing is a great professional category. Think like Amazon, categories for books. And then I have them drill it down. And in an hour, sometimes 90 minutes, they have 60 pieces of content that they can create just from the instruction on how to do that and how to place it and how to find the right elements in order to create it. And then I bring them over to a sheet that's basically a daily documentation. So here's all the things you need to do on a daily basis. And I take out the guesswork of, should I do a Facebook Live? Wait, no. Should it be a post? No, wait. Should it have an image or no image? Right? We overcomplicate it, just like business. Business is so easy, and people make it so freaking complicated, and it's not. Engineers are the best entrepreneurs because it's A to B.
I'm an engineer.
B to C, C to D, right? I got you, bro.
Yeah.
So the cool thing is they just execute because it is the process. So they follow the process. So in the same way for content, building relationships, and what's the best way to create content that's going to foster healthy relationships and business relationships and all those things is we start with a personal story and relative. I give people a visual and I say, I want you to close your eyes and envision there's 100 people in a room. Who's there? And I get them to describe who's there. Now I'm like, okay, that's who you're talking to. That's your audience. So there's other people in the hallway, right? Grandma, who's on your Facebook feed. They're going to hear your story, but they're not actually participating in the event. So we got to get very clear about, who we're talking to and what context they're there to learn from you or experience who you are. So we hit it with personal story. So boom, right out of the gate. So the story usually I tell is, of course, a business failure because it's easy. Marion Jones, the Olympic athlete, is the one who personally taught me that. But going one step further, I tell a story about when I was 5 and I drowned. And so that's a crazy story, but it happened. And I was petrified of water until I was 12 years old. Wow. And so when you get a traumatic event like that as a kid, a near-death experience, it changes the way that your brain works in a lot of ways. But when I was 12 years old, my grandmother taught me how to swim again. And at that moment, my DNA was changed. That's my story. So at that moment, I rewired the composition of my body through the breakthrough of having the audacious faith to step through that thing, that greatest fear, and having perseverance to never give up. That's some good DNA for an entrepreneur, right? So you see me now and you might see, it seems like the highlight reel, like this dude gets up, he gets freaking pummeled, he gets down, that's my call. My calling is to get back up.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And I set by example and I talk about it. So then a huge magnet comes where people believe that same thing, who love a good comeback story. And it's just following the thread. So there's 13 types of content that every entrepreneur needs to create. I'm going to give that to you guys. You can put it in the show notes so that people can go download it. I'm not going to put it behind a form or anything like that. I don't do that kind of stuff. Sure. Just go ahead and go grab it. And I'll outline the 13 types of content that you should create that will develop a higher level of connection with the people that you serve.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that'll be super helpful.
Definitely, for sure. It's always good when you get something from an individual you interview to let them know that, I mean, this guy's basically practicing what he preaches, right? Mm-hmm. And so over the past 5 years, Nick, man, you've had the ability to work with hundreds of entrepreneurs. And I know you've kind of already answered this to a certain degree, but I want to kind of spin it and add a little different flavor with it. But with that said, what are some of the biggest obstacles? I mean, again, like you've already identified a few that are keeping people from creating this content or trying to develop some sort of content strategy, right? Because I think the content strategy portion, obviously you have to, before you develop a content strategy, you have to develop or create content. And I think, again, a lot of people's sticking points are just creating even that first piece of content.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say. I work with a lot of personal brands between that 6 and 7 figure entrepreneur space. And for those who are doing 8+, the strategy changes probably by the time you hit about 3 to 5 million, you're going to outgrow a personal brand, unless you're Tony Robbins, which there's only one. Sure, there's other people like, right, you have Russell Brunson, but there's usually a separation of where they go personal brand and then they have their business brand. So I'm just going to speak contextually to the personal brands. For the business brands, go do your homework on HubSpot and Moz.com and all those other places and just follow the thread and do the right thing. But for a personal brand, the number one reason why people don't create content, and certainly don't create the content that they should be creating, is because they are afraid of the thoughts, judgments, and opinions of other people. 150,000% that is the case.
Agreed.
Because when I get underneath the surface, and again, I've done this with probably close to 200 people. When I get underneath the surface, it always comes down to their ex-boyfriend, who's still on their Facebook wall, or that they were, struggle with abandonment things and they never resolved something with a parent, or, I had this one person, this was crazy. Their father said, well, like, we're not the rich version of like whatever they're like. So let's say Smith. We're not the rich Smiths. That's just not up. The story determines the belief infrastructure, which determines the values and actions that person takes. And so from whether it's passed down generationally or if that's like just what he believed, I have an entrepreneur who will absolutely build $1 million business going, but my father said that it was never going to be that way.
Exactly.
So there's this crazy mirror of me being like, you have insane potential, and them going like, yeah, but I was always told that's not possible. And so she doesn't create as much as she does because he's on her. Delete the people off your Facebook page who are holding you back immediately. Go do it right now. Like stop the show for 2 seconds, delete them all, and then come back, because that is the number one thing that's holding people back. And then when we get into imposter syndrome and all these other things that happen at, every huge entrepreneur, Elon Musk has imposter syndrome, okay? You're not going to get away from it, but how you define it is what matters. If you feel like a fraud, you're doing something right. If you feel like, well, I don't want to create content that says how great I am because I don't want to brag. Hey, trust me, the narcissists who actually are the ones like pontificating and bragging don't know that they are, okay? So if you're even questioning it, then you know that you're doing the right thing. If you're questioning, I hope I have the integrity to talk about this, then you're doing the right thing. Yeah. And that's the big idea, is that it's the shadow side that actually is the confirmation to keep going. So what do you need to do? Show up.
There you go.
Show up. Just like grab your Zoom call from 2 hours earlier in the day, find a good moment where you had a good conversation about something, and freaking cut it in iMovie and post the damn thing. Like, speed is everything in this game. Document, don't create. Don't stare at a blinking mouse for 30 minutes figuring out, well, what should I talk about today? Figure out what you've already talked about, talk about that, or just post the video of what you've already done. It's so easy.
Awesome.
Yeah. When in doubt, just you start creating something, or at least writing something down, right? Start either be working on a framework or the actual content itself. Yeah. I think that's really, so can you talk about how intimacy and connection, how that plays into successful content?
Yes. Pretty straightforward. The number one place of disconnection in relationships is when people feel misunderstood. So a lack of intimacy or connection has to do with a lack of empathy. Now, let me frame this one more way. Empathy is a common word that's starting to get thrown around the last year or so. Let me go one layer deeper. Compassion. So if you want to have intimacy and connection with the people that you serve, and in the content that you create, you better have a whole lot of empathy, and you better have a whole lot of compassion for those people. Now, in the context of looking at my previous story of myself, I can look at someone else in that situation and my heart leaps to try to help them. I have some crazy views, just personally. And one of them is that time isn't real. I don't think that time is real. I think it's a construct that we've created. I understand that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we go to bed and we wake up, and I get all that. But what I don't believe is that like anything is outside of the present. So what I teach and train people to do when it comes to intimacy and connection and working with the right people and having the right relationships is you can actually show up as the Clint, as the Andrew 2 years from now and pull them back to today. And the only thing that you have to do is show up in the way that they would show up. It's like somebody who wants to lose weight. Well, if you just go another day eating Chick-fil-A, what do you think is going to happen? Right? If you just go another day, just hoping that you can quit that addiction or that you can, end that relationship, like it's just going to perpetuate. So make the decision to become the person 2 years from now. And that's typically the fastest growth pattern of how I help people grow, is visualizing where they'll be, the connections that they have, the rooms that they're speaking in. And then I separate that from the current place of where they're at today and the people who they're spending time with today and the conversations they're having today. And I flip the lens, I give them a new script and send them out into the world. And all of a sudden they're like, that's the way that people actually wanted them to show up.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a guy who said, "You're playing on the wrong field, dude." This was like 6 months ago. And I was like, I saw like Tom Brady going out into a JV football game and being like, that doesn't make sense, but that is how I feel.
Yeah.
So I made a decision to show up differently, and that's what propelled a lot of growth. So intimacy and connection has to do with a couple things. The first thing it has to do with is understanding your audience. Okay. Now, I'm not going to like give you like the Harvard Business Review on this, guys. It's really not hard. In order to understand your audience, if you're a personal brand, you need to understand the previous version of you. It's really simple. Go back to the things, go back to your old posts, go back to your old journals, your old videos, like old stories, figure it out. And
figure out
then
what you needed to know in a previous
watch
version.
it like a movie, figure out what you needed or what worked for you, and then show up in that capacity for others. That's a surefire way. And the other thing is when you develop, like go take an empathy training, like go take a compassion training, deep compassion for people. It's like Mother Teresa. She had incredible work like that she did in the world. Why? Because she understood the pain of those people. And she also understood that it was her calling. People can choose 3 paths. You can either have a job, you can own a business, or you can have a calling. When you choose to have a calling, the intimacy aspect of the people that you serve will absolutely 10x. That's probably the do is to understand that you're not here by accident, that you have a job to do. And more importantly, that you have a group of people that you're called to serve. And if you can show up the best for one person, 100%, you won't care about impacting 100 people, 1%. You'll just bet on the fact that I'm going to change someone's life or impact their life in a beautiful way. And that's just how I do it. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
No, awesome. And I mean, that helps to get customers in the door, right? But it also, I think, goes a long way with customer service, which is so important. Once you've already gotten customers, how do you treat the people that you're already working with? And a lot of companies get that so wrong. I mean, I'd venture to say that most companies get that wrong, but the ones who get it right, it's people know, people feel it. And like, I work with, when I see a company who, I reach out to them and I need some help, and they get the customer service part right. I mean, their product could be not quite as good as other people's product, but I don't care. It's like, you help me and you have some compassion when I'm feeling, a little lost, and it'll go a long way. So I think that's really interesting. So it helps both ways, to get customers and to keep them.
And some companies are built with the infrastructure as the customer is at the center.
Yeah.
So, or they have a culture that's employee first, which when you take care of the employees really well, and they're like exuberantly happy and they love, and they got their food trucks and God knows what else, when they have all that stuff and their vending machines, then they can go help the other people because they're not worried about their daily stuff. And that's a benefit. Here's what I know. When it comes to the context of support service or whatever, when it happens in the context of business, and I don't care if you're doing over $1 billion a year or if you're just getting started tomorrow, it's just like a relationship or like a marriage. I told you, everything is a mirror. Okay. Let me ask a question that's going to probably trigger some people. You remember your first date with your wife, with your girlfriend, with whatever? Okay. Let's compare how you showed up that day to how you're showing up now. That's the difference of having an organization that understands support longevity and having promoters of their brand, is if you've actually nurtured that relationship like a fine wine, and it's actually better than the day that you were there. Now, some of you went the opposite way and you're like, oh man, I have not shown up like that excited and that present and that like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing that's right in front of me. I have my full attention and I'm here to just be here with you and enjoy the moment, to be in the moment, right? So there's 2 different stories being told there, and it's a direct mirror to how people feel. Here we go. Who you're serving right now.
Yep.
If an issue shows up in your marriage, I promise you it will show up in your business. So if commitment's a problem, if showing up's a problem, if you being moody is a problem, it's going to show up everywhere. And that's just that's the name of the game. That's part of it.
So with that said, man, I know that you enjoy, and I read this about you, that you enjoy mentorship and advisory more than anything you have done in business ever. And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge statement right there. And it's all about the content, relationships, and trust. So what effect has your content and approach had on your authority currently and in your influence in the market today?
So I'll answer the first part, and then I'll answer the second part. The reason why I think mentorship and advising has become the thing for me is because I've finally gotten back to my roots of like figuring out who the hell I am. You know, and for me, like, I just know that I'm a people person, that I love seeing others win. And I also understand that my energy is number one, the reason why people hire me. So some people, I mean, when I work one-on-one with people, they pay over $250,000 for that year. And they hire me. All of them say the same thing. They hire me because of my energy, not because of tactical ability. And so I understand that's a superpower. So me getting proximity to people is actually how I help them grow. It's through osmosis, which is so cool. But it took a lot of me accepting me for who I am and not for who I'm not to understand that. And that's what allowed me to put that statement out. And again, I actually produce, it's almost like therapy. It sounds insane, but it's true. My content is my expression. It's my creativity. So when I create content, it's actually like I'm verbalizing and contextualizing a reality that now exists. So I say that's the thing, my favorite thing to do, and that's the best thing that I do. That's me actually adopting that belief system. And at the same time, it makes me freaking so excited because I'm like, finally, I've stepped into my power and I can own that and not feel weird about it, and not question the value and all that dumb stuff that we all do. But in the opposite side of how has then that reality now showing up as a mentor and showing up as a consultant and all those things, how has that changed the game for me on a content to influence ratio? It's everything. You've got to be, if you're willing to put yourself out there, you've also got to be willing to take the arrows.
Definitely. Agree,
Yeah.
man.
So I feel like at times I'm standing there like arms open wide and there's 1,000 people behind me who I'm telling, do this, do this, do this. And I've just got to stand there and take it.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that I wasn't prepared for, although it was the number one thing that my mentor told me to be aware of. He said, you love helping people in relationships because it's been a point of trial for you. It's been a hard point for you. Even though I was widely accepted, I don't have that story of high school, like being pushed out. I was the kid who was popular, who would bring acceptance to the kids who were not. That was my favorite thing to do, was to help people feel accepted. And that's because I felt like I was given a gift of acceptance and of connection with others. And I didn't have to do it, but I didn't care. I didn't care about the popular kid's opinion of me going to somebody and saying, I'm not hanging with you guys today. This kid's sitting by himself. I'm gonna go spend time with him, because that's bullshit and it shouldn't happen. I was never concerned about people's response in that way. Here's where it was for me. You ever heard that saying, the people who are closest to you are also the ones who can hurt you the most? That's always my blind spot. My blind spot is I let people in such a way of where I give them full access, and I still I don't prepare myself. It's something I'm working on, but I don't prepare myself for some of the things that'll happen. And so for me, like COVID hit at the same time as there were some things happening within mentor mind where I was like, I mean, people were like exploding in their growth, personal growth. I mean, people literally just say my marriage, so much of those things happening. I'm just a mirror. I'm going, no, you did the hard work. You invested your time. You were willing to be vulnerable. You were willing to go to counseling. This is not about me. It's about you. I'm just a mirror. Let me be a container in a mirror. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. And I let the supernatural, the meta, whatever, do the work. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like this thing of we're trying to figure out when you're building intimacy, you're building connection, you're building authority, you're building influence. You got to understand the byproduct of that is there are going to be people who get closer to you. And the closer the people get in context of relationship with you, if you challenge them to be at their highest, see, I'm a challenger, but through love. That's different. That's the difference about me. I'm not a challenger through intimidation, like Steve Jobs. It's perform better because you suck and all that energy. I'm more like Gary Vee. I'm going to love you to death so that you overperform because I know the greatness that's in you. And so some of them don't know how to respond to that type of winning. I mean, seriously. And I did an assessment, and out of 35 people, there were 3 people who I would say were disruptive. So, let's bake that out. That's 10% or something like that. Mm-hmm. And with each one of those individual relationships, there was stuff in their life that had to do with relationships that were fractured, every single one of them, all three. So they had fractured relationships. One girl raised herself from 5 years old. Her parents were meth heads. Incredibly talented, awesome person, but just like stopped showing up and became very accusational, like of stuff like you can't make up. It's just really wild. I had another kid who he had only done $500 in December. I gave him access to my audience. He did $11,000 in 2 days. Then he started backing away from the relationship because, like, I think for me personally, we had a lot of conversation. I always go through this stuff with people, like, let's talk about this, right? And, you know, he realized that, like, there was a lot of context of relationships in his life of when he gets too close to people and he starts feeling like he's winning, he doesn't feel worthy. So he pulls himself back down. And so he shrinks and he actually contracts the retainer because of a lot of trauma from his childhood of relationships with friends and parents and like all these other dynamics. So one of the 4 agreements, that book, The 4 Agreements, is it's never about you. So if you're hearing this conversation, you're like, well, I know that my thing is to mentor and advise people. I know my goal is to show up for people in the best way that I can, to call greatness out of them. And I believe in my calling and all those things. You also have to understand the opposite side, which is you might have actually more belief in someone that they have in themselves. And you have to be comfortable enough to be rejected by the people who you actually feel called to serve at the highest level, simply because they just are not there yet. And so my encouragement to those people and to the people I've even given context on is to just keep doing the inner work. You know, we've all had injustices done against us, all of us. Everybody has a story of injustice. It's just the way that the world is wired. And so what we have to do is be sensitive to those things, but also not allow them to hold us in a prison any longer. And that's my call for people, is just when we go deep, we go deep. We go all the way there and we try to unravel some stuff. And I'm not a therapist and I don't pretend to be, and that's not my goal. But my goal is to create awareness. And what people do with that is certainly up to them. And I have a lot of resources to point them in the right direction if things get relatively serious, which they do sometimes.
Sure.
So,
yeah. I mean, the more exposure you have, the more you're trying to help people, you know, the greater impact you're trying to have. I think that probably, you know, the greater things can go wrong, right? Like if you're just trying to, you know, hey, I'll help you out for a couple hours a month, you know, that's it. Like, then you're probably not you're not having a lot of exposure. The impact isn't great, but it's also, you know, you're not probably going to get wrapped up as much, and there's not going to be as much issue potentially. So,
yeah, I'll ask you a question, Andrew. Like, you know, you ever hear these stories about with family, right? Where it's like somebody asked to borrow money. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I've heard a million of these stories. So I made a decision early on with my wife, because again, it comes back to the central point of giving. I said, if anyone in our family asks for money, we don't have a repayment plan here. So we just give freely. And what I mean by that is no one has to pay us back, but it's also my decision to give.
Right.
And so I don't care if you need $10, $1, or you need $100,000. The repayment is not necessary, because to me, I don't want anyone to have a level of indebtedness to me, of where I have to hold them in a prison or where they feel like they're in one. Right. Because to me, that's not right. So what I do is just,
that friction.
Yeah, of course it creates friction and it causes so many problems. And like, so we just give freely. So like my sister was going to law school, my sister-in-law, you know, so we just like covered a bunch of that. Right. And it's just like, we just do it. Why? Well, why not? I don't know. I don't understand. So there's certain things like that of where you just find this, but I think to your point, it's like when we just give freely and we can put it out there. There's no expectation of transaction. I'm just giving freely of my time, energy, or resources. Yeah. It creates the proper type of relationship that has no strings attached. And I think that's a really powerful thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have just your single expectation is or your most important expectation is to just connect with people and give people value, then you're going to win. I mean, obviously at the end of the day, your business, you're trying to make money, you have to, but yeah, if you're just like, I am in this to help people and they find value in it, then the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah. I'll ask you.
Cool.
Yeah. And what I see from what you're saying, man, it's like, you're not only practicing this in business. I mean, you're sitting here talking about personal, family, right? And I know business can be personal for individuals, but I'm talking about, like, you can see that you're backing it up, right? Like you're not just practicing in the business world or in your business, but with family. And that's powerful, man, because it's like, I come to play the same way every day. It doesn't matter if it's in business or if it's personal with family, that, hey, why am I doing this? Just because I'm doing it. And I've decided that. And I think right there, man, that shows how big of a heart you have for individuals just as a whole. And it's not black and white. It's like straight there. It's like, okay, this is what I'm about, and I'm going to show you by actions.
Yeah, dude, that's huge. I think one last note about that. I want to mention this. I am unwilling to lead anywhere that I haven't gone before. So I will say this: the reason why I'm able to back it up is because there's failure a million times before, right? So like, while you're saying that, of course, the imposter syndrome in me, right, is going like, oh, well, you don't show up for your kids 100%, maybe 95% every day, but not 100, you know? And so I'm just being transparent, like, because people have these realizations when other people are describing things or seeing situations or seeing good things about us. And dude, you're 100% right. And I fully accept it. And the thing that's really cool is that the reason why that's true for me is because I've put in the work to make it true. And the reason why I can go help out my sister is because I put in the hard work to understand that I'm not building this so that I can drive a Ferrari. I don't give a crap. I'll drive a freaking 91 Corolla. I don't care. The reason why I do this is so that I can serve my family at the highest level and so that I can give a gift to humanity. Everybody's why is different and nobody wants the same things. And most people don't define what they actually want. They just say what they don't want. I don't want to be broke, so I guess I have to be rich, right? No. You need to have full intent to be like, this is exactly actually what I'm looking for. You know, I'm looking for $50 million. Not for me. My wife's father was murdered when she was 3. She never had a dad to raise her. She never had anybody to teach her how to ride a bike. She never had somebody to be there at that first dance, the first boyfriend, the first stuff, the first trauma event, nothing. That's my why, dude.
Wow.
Because there's someone else on the opposite side of that. There's also a single mom who had to raise her, who had nothing. So who do you think I want to help? Kids without dads and single moms who are just trying to make it, man.
Who step up to
that's
the plate. Show up. That's awesome, man. That's so powerful.
So I'm making deposits now that one day, when that whole thing launches, that one day it'll make sense. And so one day it'll make sense, and I'll go back to the people who invested in me and who I invested into, and I'll make a simple call to help those people. And guess what? Doctors, physicians, even religious leaders, I do not think that they're the people who are going to change the world from this point forward. I think it's going to be entrepreneurs. I think it's going to be out-of-the-box thinkers. And I think that I have a mission, that I have a heart to help those individual people not get stuck. Because getting stuck, I think, is the poisonous pill that kills so many people off from their calling. And I just do one thing all day. I write permission slips. Go do it. Go do it. Go do it. And I send them out. So that's it, man.
That's really powerful. Yeah. Well, Nick, going back to content specifically, you know, and we're talking about fear before and kind of how that's such a big hang up, and, you know, you're writing permission slips to help people kind of work through that. When we talk about quick starting or, you know, taking a quick action to get through that, you know, what is that, and how does that work?
Yeah. So I'll give you 2 versions. If you get a Ruth Chris steak, I promise you there's no microwave that heats that thing up before it gets brought to the table. It's just not happening. So the idea is, if you want to create the best content and you want to show up in your full capacity and you want to be able to create things that are going to attract and align, and where people are going to feel like, whoa, I felt that when you said that. Not that sounds good or I think that's good. It's actually like, whoa, I felt that. And you get underneath their story. It marinates. It sits. It's got to like be prepared properly. You have a 5-star Michelin chef, you know, creating that dish for you, whatever it is. I don't have a microwave, and I tell people this all the time. Well, what's the first thing I can do? Well, the first thing you can do is take an assessment of the type of content you should create. The first thing you need to do is download the document that I'm going to give you guys. The second thing that you need to understand is, are you trying to have a Ruth Chris, or are you trying to like literally, you're on, you know, when we're road tripping, it's like you have 2 choices, like McDonald's or Burger King. And sometimes you got to pick one over the other, whatever. Maybe throw an Arby's in there. So the idea is, like, at that time, you don't have access to a Ruth Chris. You don't have access to the thing. You just need to solve a problem. Well, guess what? This is what you do when you solve the problem when you get to McDonald's. You look at the damn thing and go like, oh, this is going to hurt, but I'll take a number one. Yeah, Big Mac. That's going to happen. I might as well throw a Coke in there because this whole meal thing, this is destroyed. So I might as well just do it. You just make the decision to just do it, right? So that's where I'm at. You know where Just Do It came from with Nike? It came from a guy who was standing there about to be executed. Most people don't know this story. It was from a guy who's about to be executed, and he said, what? Just do it. So there's my push to you. Either go create a vulnerable story. Be honest. Show a scar. Okay. No one wants to hear all your nonsense and going, now my girlfriend, whatever. Nobody wants to hear all that crap. What people want to understand is something that you've been through that can create transparency and connection, a common thread, maybe a story that you've never shared before. And dude, here's what happens, Andrew, Clint. In the process, the person frees themselves. The minute that they publish a transparent story that allows them to be vulnerable with the people around them, they just took the keys in a prison that they're in, reached their hand around the door, unlocked it, and walked out. Now, content creation after that point, after your greatest fear, it's so simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're breaking through and I think that you get like, it's not a writer's block because that can sort of happen at any time. But like I remember as a kid sitting down to do homework, and the hardest thing was just starting. It was just like, I wanted to do everything but homework. And I mean, I was a good student, but I love to, play hockey, basketball, tennis. Like I was always want to be outside or watching cartoons. There was literally wanted to do everything else besides do homework. But once I just sat down and started it, I was like, oh, all right, this isn't so bad. I can do this, and then you just get into it, you finish it up, and then you can be on to the next thing. So yeah, just a lot of time.
It's just taking that first step.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah. With that said, man, we only have a few more questions, but since switching from a megaphone to a magnet mindset, that was a huge piece that I pulled away from your video. I resonated with it. I paused it then, and I was like, I replayed it several times. I'm like, that is powerful, because I want you to explain that a little bit, but how have you seen mentorship and community lead to explosive growth in your life and in business, man? That might be a big thing.
It's a big question, but no, that's all right, dude. So birds of a feather flock together, right? Like attracts like. The 5 people around you are the most impactful people in your life, and they'll determine the trajectory of your life. Being misunderstood is one of the biggest violations of relationships, right? So sometimes you have a really good thing to give. All right, I'm going to think of my daughter real quick, right? So my daughter made me this bracelet that I have in my hand, and it's so special, right? So it's like, has a little heart on it, and it says love. Yeah. She made this little thing, and it's broken like 50 times. Cool. I just keep like tying it back up and putting it back on.
Yeah.
That's the best that she had to give. Now I could either look at that and be like, well, that sucks. And there's purple and I don't want to wear it. Right. Like, this is what we do in relationships. This is what we do in business. Or I could be like, that's amazing. You poured your heart and soul in that thing. In fact, because of its imperfection is what makes it perfect. Because of its innocence is what makes it incredible. Like everything about that is going to come down to perspective. And so like when we see ourselves, right, this idea that like a cheetah that hangs out with ducks and is raised by ducks and thinks it's a duck. Okay. A lot of people out there right now think that they are someone and something they are not, simply because of the context of the people around them and the gifts that they've given to others that were unappreciated, like this bracelet. When someone accepts the greatest gift that you have to give, it feels amazing. And what do? You invest more into those relationships. And so the idea around like the magnet versus megaphone idea is really simply this. If you create content that builds relationships, that builds trust, that drives revenue, you're doing that from a perspective that's attractional and not, it's not broadcasting. It's actually attracting. Okay. Now here's the interesting thing about a magnet. It has 2 sides. It has a polarizing side and an attractional side. And I'm going to remind you that if 50% of people in the United States like you, you can become president. There's an energy balance there that's very true. So with that being said, you have a magnet. A megaphone is, everybody listen to me and here's what I have to say. Have you ever tried to change someone? How well did that work?
Yeah, man. Not very well.
Doesn't work.
Never does. No.
How did you feel when someone tried to change you?
Never good. Yeah. And
Not
we
good.
see it a
Not
lot.
a good feeling,
We see it a
right?
lot
What's
on
going
social
on?
media these days too. You know, everybody's trying to change everybody, you know?
Yep. So if you stop trying to change people and you start just trying to get proximity to them, the game changes. So with relationship with, again, you can look at anybody around you. You know, you have a brother, you have a friend, you have a spouse, you have a dog. It doesn't matter, right? Like if you are just trying to tell them what to do all the time, they're doing the toddler, you know, yeah, I'm not listening, because nobody wants to be changed. And you don't want to be changed and they don't want to be changed. So what do we have to do? We have to magnetize. What comes with proximity? Proximity comes intimacy. And from intimacy comes greater connection and deeper relationships and more meaningful connection. Mm-hmm. And so in the process of when you're creating content, it follows the same thing. I want you to think like a magnet, which means there's two sides to what you're going to do. You're going to attract and you're going to repel. But you're going to basically push twice the amount of people away, yet attract 10 times the amount of people on the opposite side. And that's the cool part about the equation. Technically, a magnet polarizes as much as it attracts, but I think it works different with content because there's a supply and demand issue of vulnerable, authentic people. Even if you have a SaaS company, you're doing $8 million a year and you're listening right now, you can still tell the founder's story. You can still talk about the shortcomings that you've had as a business and how you overcame them and what you're doing differently. And the people who are on your side and want you to win are going to be super fans. And the people who are on the fence are the people who are going to get out of your way anyways. And, you know, you'll take all those ops out of your pipeline like overnight and stop chasing them. So just like any good relationship, you take it a day at a time. You focus on being attractional and yet understanding that you're going to polarize. If you're not polarizing, then you're doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. Then you're just how many haters does Gary Vee have? How many haters does Trump have? How many haters does even anybody on the opposite side have? You know, like that's the idea is you've got to stand for something. And that's the difference between someone attracting to you versus you pontificating on social media, which typically doesn't have a high level of engagement. It's two-way versus one-way conversation. And that's the big idea.
Yeah, it's a great point. The two-way versus one-way is so important. That's awesome. Well, Nick, as we wrap up this episode, what is one piece of advice or a tip that you could give our listeners that would help, that would give them some value that they can add to their entrepreneurial journey?
Show the fuck up. Just do it. Just show up. You're going to fail 1,000 times. Okay. If you're the most real entrepreneurs or even being classified as an entrepreneur, you need to have one major failure. You have to. Yeah. You cannot be an entrepreneur if you don't fail. So you have to embrace failure and reassign meaning to failure every single day. I have literally been in my basement for 24 hours at one point, like awesome office environment and all that down here. But there's this one time I remember very vividly, and I would literally scream at the top of my lungs. And it was like 2 a.m. or midnight or whatever the hell it was. And I'm thinking my wife probably thinks I'm insane. But that's the limit that sometimes that you get to in entrepreneurship of where it's like Rain Man. You like can put all this stuff all over your whole office and you have all these great ideas and all these big ideas and you still feel stuck. You've still got to persevere. You've got to go to bed. You've got to wake up. You got to make the kids food. You got to do your stuff. You got to whatever. Those things are all going to be reality all the time. You have to make peace and understand that you are standing in the eye of a storm that's spinning around you. But if you feel like that's your calling, you just have to accept it. Stop waiting for everything in your business to be correct to show up for your kids. Stop waiting for everything to be correct in your business to show up for your girlfriend and for, your boyfriend and whoever else that you need to show up for. You just need to understand that like it is what it is. It's your calling, and you've got to make sure that in the pursuit of entrepreneurship that you do not, shut down all the relationships around your life for the people who really are going to be there for you when no one else is. So get a great connection to source. Find what it is for you. If it's God, awesome. If it's Buddha, cool. If it's freaking the trees, I don't care. Like find whatever it is for you to have a divine connection and make sure that you focus on the people that you love and who love you back. It's the biggest thing. Yeah, I love that. Guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Nick's working on, check out nickcavuoto.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
I want to thank you, Andrew, for continuing this journey with me, brother. From the both of us, Nick, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and as well as helping us add value to our community. You dropped a ton of value bombs. The guide that you're going to let us share with our followers and our listeners, man. I think it's going to be great. So thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.